and welcome back to Walton on Trent and a strong sense of déjà vu. It's been a very frustrating few weeks since you were last here, and progress has been disappointing, not helped by 2 consecutive weekends away in Edinburgh. This year's flying by, and I'm not where I expected to be at this point, but I'll show you what I have been doing in a moment. For prototypes and rolling stock, we're back to my first love, INTERCITY, in a big way this month, as we take a look at the third of my AC electric types, the Class 86, in both 2 and 4 subclasses. And there's been a massive and rather expensive change to my Mark III coaching stock. At the end of last episode, I was about to unleash my crap carpentry skills and build a frame upon which I could fit backscene boards. The shape of my loft means that the layout has no back wall, and there are very few places in which I can secure solid uprights to which I can fix plywood boards. I've learned during the early construction stages to embrace my forest of loft trusses rather than fight them, and with some admittedly ugly and cack-handed joinery, I managed to build what can only be described as a flimsy fence using pre-cut 3.6mm ply boards from B&Q. These are more expensive than getting the shop to cut bigger boards into strips, but my car doesn't have folding back seats and I'll never be able to get them home. My idea was then to build an exact copy of the fence in 2 equal lengths, but with timber hooks across the top. This would let me fit the backscene rolls onto each length, hang them on the fence, and then slide them together to give a seamless image. For the backscenes themselves, I just wanted plain sky with nothing else visible. I bought 2 packs of 2 sheets, but I wasted one when I immediately fixed it to untreated plywood board before I designed my fence, so that got scrapped. For attempt 2, I treated each board with 2 coats of a gloss varnish. Strangely, this immediately felt like it was giving less adhesion than the untreated board as I rolled out the backscenes. Nevertheless, I proceeded carefully and slowly, trying to smooth out any air bubbles with a microfiber cloth. I actually got them all straight and smooth, and managed to fit the boards up onto the fence, and it was all looking pretty good. But then, disaster. Back from work the following day, and I climbed the loft ladder to find this. I eased them all back into position with my cloth, but then, the next night, same again. Worse in fact, with one section completely detached. Luckily, they didn't crease themselves as they unpeeled, and I was able to salvage them all for my 3rd attempt. I brushed the boards with a diluted PVA and then fixed the sheets again, but this turned into a right old mess as the glue and the semi-sticky backing made them very, very hard to work with. I ended up ruining one sheet, at which point I went the full Arthur Fowler and tore the lot off. Roll forward a couple more days and I ordered yet another set, a bit cloudier this time as the others are out of stock, and they don't have the adhesive backing. So I tried them with a thin spread of PVA and they immediately started wrinkling and sogging up. By this point I was ready to rip the loft down, never mind the back scenes, but I had 3 sheets left of the 4 and tried again the next night, this time simply using double-sided tape. And bingo, here we are at last. These are just about as good as I can get, although I do have one large wrinkle here, which I don't remember seeing when I rolled them out. Are these going to stand the test of time? My gut feeling is these are going to age like milk, but for now they're up, the fence is fixed on, and I'm cracking on. All of this faffing around with Sky has prevented me from doing anything really on the hotel, but I have now cut out the right shape of MDF boards, which will form the car park surface. These have been primed, and I've started painting them into a similar weathered look to my platforms, using a range of Vallejo air colours. The next step will be to build the entrance into the hotel from the car park, and I bought this set of sliding aluminium doors from Scale Model Scenery. I'm not sure how much detail will be visible inside the doors, but the lift and stairs lobby inside will be lit and have at least some suggestion of colour. I'll probably put the doors on each side rather than front and back, as this would fit the location of the lift shafts, which will run up the centre of the building here, and the shaft would be side by side and not have a doorway between them. The car park will need white lines and other detailing at some point, but I need to work out the building's footprint first, I think. My prototype is a very complex structure at the lower levels, so initial progress will be quite slow and probably involve a lot of trial and error as I decide on the best way to build this thing. I'm really looking forward to pressing on with it though. It will be concrete again, and it will be ugly, but it has the potential to be the most eye-catching building here, and I hope I can pull it off. Something I inadvertently pulled off just before last episode was the edge of the little bay platform on 3 here. That's now been repaired and repainted, and now just needs ballasting and finishing touches. Of all the different configurations I've tried here, and there've been a few, I think this one works best. I can see some old rails or sleepers being left here from time to time in the future as my detailing gets dialed up. More detail has arrived, I'm pleased to say, and I'm focusing on the platform ends for now with new benches, filled planters and the iconic brute trolleys. There's also a stray luggage trolley over there on 1, with more to come inside the station. I think they were from rusty rails and they're quite delicate, so I don't like having them all out while I'm doing work. The brutes are from Westhill Wagon Works, not one of my favourite suppliers, but they do make nice stuff, and these have come out really well. The benches were a bespoke commission done for me by Timscale 3D prints and represent the standard INTERCITY station bench of the early 90s, and many can still be seen around the country today. I couldn't be happier with these, and the feedback has been very positive. It's nice to be part of introducing something like this into the hobby. Just remember where you saw them first. The benches, the brutes and the trolleys were all painted with these acrylic paint pens. This set was from Amazon and has a wide range of colours. It's certainly not rail match, but I've managed to find a close fit for just about everything I need so far. The red in particular has served me very well for both my benches and the coach interiors you'll see later on, and this darkish blue did the brutes and my Class 87 driver's desks. Many of the colours haven't been touched yet, but they'll be great for my passengers' clothing when I get round to that project. Last but not least, the Victorian retaining wall has had some more sections added and painted, although an eBay supplier letdown caused me several days of delay, otherwise this section could have been finished. I fixed all the sections together away from the layout so I could make sure the whole thing was straight and square, and they're braced on the back with offcuts of MDF. This angled section on the end is hinged with strips of acrylic. This keeps it aligned horizontally, but lets me flex to the correct angle here to butt up flush against the start of the 1960s structure. There's more work to do here, clearly, and any faults or cock-ups will be disguised with weeds or something like that. I'm also going to have a really big advertising billboard somewhere here, which can disguise any awkward intersections. So, slow progress, but some progress. And to be honest, there isn't an awful lot more to add to the platform ends, apart from the OHLE gantries, and I'm not ready for those yet while I'll be reaching across to work on the hotel. This big billboard is only temporary, but something like this will become permanent eventually, just like this one at Stafford. I don't mind if it obscures the view of the trains. In fact, interrupted sightlines will make the whole scene and atmosphere across the station more realistic. I want to be glimpsing the flash of an express between signage and pillars, or a loco nameplate through the mesh of brute trolleys. Born out of the AL1 to AL5 prototype electric locos of the late 50s and early 60s, the 100-strong fleet of Class 86s was built and introduced in 1965 and 1966. Initially designated AL6, the first 40 were built at Doncaster Works, with the remaining 60 at English Electric's Vulcan Foundry. As built, they were rated for 100 mph running and doubled the number of AC electric locos available to the London Midland region, enabling them to retire their remaining steam engines. Wearing BR's monostral blue from the start, they were designed as a mixed traffic locomotive and would form the backbone of West Coast operations for nearly 4 decades, as well as seeing service on the Great Eastern Main Line. Their early years were not without issues. Unlike the first generation prototypes, the AL6's traction motors were axle mounted, and this significant unsprung weight caused a very hard ride and considerable track damage at high speeds. In 1969, E3173 was fitted with sets of helical flexi-coil springs to its bogies in an attempt to alleviate the problem. The loco earned the nickname Zebedee after the Magic Roundabout character, but the trial was a success. A rollout of a modified 86-2 bogie was undertaken, with the springs, new dampers and modified wheel sets transforming the performance of the locos to which they were fitted. This led to the first subclass division, now under tops, where the as-built fleet was designated 86-0 and limited to 80 mph for freight and secondary passenger duties, while the improved 86s were classed as 86-2 and assigned to high-speed passenger trains. E3173 would also be used a few years later to trial the aerodynamic performance of the prototype HST cab. Under tops it would become 86204 and later named City of Carlisle. Eventually, the ride modifications would be rolled out to the entire fleet. Those fitted later on were designated 86-4s, but they were interchangeable with the 86-2s, and both subclasses would be seen on high-speed trains. 3 86-2s were used as test beds for the Class 87, 86's 101 to 103, essentially being a Class 87 in a Class 86 shell. As sectorisation was more strictly applied in the early 90s, the general rule of thumb was 86 1s and 2s on INTERCITY expresses, 86 4s on mail, and 86 6s on freight, being basically derated 86 4s. Withdrawals began in the late 90s, with nearly half of the fleet eventually scrapped, many in the 2003 to 2005 period. Another 40-odd were exported to Hungary or Bulgaria, some quite recently, and many still operate today. 3 have been preserved: 86-101 Sir William A. Stanier at Cruise Locomotive Services Group, 86-259 Peter Pan, also named Les Ross on the other side after the former Birmingham DJ who now owns it, and 86-401 Mons Meg at Carnforth West Coast Railways. 5 were lost to accidents, strangely all within a few miles of Stafford Station. 211 City of Milton Keynes and 429 The Times were both destroyed in the high-speed head-on at Colwich Junction in 1986. 429, the 100th and last 86 to be built, was heading a packed Friday evening train from Euston to Manchester and overran a signal, coming to rest across the Diamond Crossing at the heart of the junction, just as 211 rounded the Shugborough Curve at line speed with a train from Liverpool. The driver of 211, Eric Good, didn't stand a chance, and one can only imagine the horror of his final few seconds alive. Remarkably, given the devastation, he was the only fatality. I remember this accident happening, and it's always held a strange interest for me. A mate of mine lived 2 miles from the accident site at the time and heard the impact. 239 LS Lowry was lost when it ran into the derailed tail end of a freight train at Rickerscote in 1996 while working the Coventry-Glasgow TPO. One postal worker was killed as he moved between 2 carriages at the moment of impact. The loco spun around in the collision and ended up mere inches away from the side of a house. And 611 and 631's careers ended at Norton Bridge in 2003 when they ran into the back of a stationary freight train. I run 5 86s here at Walton, all from Helgen, although none of them are quite what they seem. The least modified one is 86-430 in RAS livery. This is a simple renumbering of the standard Helgen 86-416 model, as 430 covers 100% of my era and 416 doesn't. It runs on a Locksound 5 chip with Lego Manbiffo sound through a 25x25x7mm Megabass speaker. I do still have a version of 416, but the body sits on a stripped out free-rolling chassis from an old 8-pin model, and I run it dead in train with mail vans or on RAS loco moves, both of which were common through the Crewe Stafford area. I modified the paintwork around the grills to reflect the prototype, and you can see here that they are both subtly different. They both had a coat of satin varnish to make the very thin paintwork look less plasticky. 416 donated its 21-pin chassis to one of my 86-2s. 416 was one of the first 86s built at Doncaster in April 1965 and introduced to traffic a couple of months later as E3109. It became 86016 under tops in 1974 and 316 when fitted with modified wheels in the early 80s. Named Wigan Pier in September 1984, it was overhauled at Crewe Works in late 1986, where it received the full suspension modifications, emerging as exec liveried 86416 in early 1987. 2 years later, it was repainted into the mainline livery, reflecting its mixed traffic duties. There are plenty of pictures online of 416 working intercities, mail trains and freightliners. But at the end of 1992, it was permanently assigned to RAS and emerged nameless in their striking red livery at the start of 1993. It was withdrawn in this livery in 2002 and scrapped at booths in June 2005. 430 started its career at the same time as E3105, another Doncaster example, built in February 1965 but entering traffic in June of that year. It waited longer than 416 for its suspension modifications, running as 86030 until late 1986, when it received them all in one go, emerging as 86430 in March 1987 with exec colours. It was named Scottish National Orchestra in June 1987, went mainline in 1989, before gaining RAS colours and losing its name at the start of 92. In early 1996, it became the only Class 86 to have its head code plates fully removed, receiving flush cab fronts at both ends. I haven't been able to find out why, so please comment below if you know. That summer at Ipswich, it was named St Edmund after the ancient king of East Anglia, but continued to appear predominantly on West Coast operations, even being hired out to Virgin Trains in the late 90s. Along with 86426, it spent its final years on hire to Freightliner, gaining their green and yellow livery sometime in 2003, but was soon withdrawn and cut up at booths in 2005. We've been waiting an age for Helgen's new 86-2s, and having had some of their recent 86s in my hands, I'm sceptical about the quality of paint finish we'll see on them. In the meantime, I've collected 3 of the older 8-pin models from various sources, and I've since cancelled all of my pre-orders for the forthcoming models. The paintwork is of a much better quality than the newer models, and I found them far easier to renumber, whereas the paint on the new ones practically evaporates with even a whiff of IPA. I was having performance issues with their old 8-pin chassis though, more on that in a bit. As a result, these 3 are now hybrids, with the old 8-pin bodies running on new 21-pin chassis, donated by 86416, and the 2 86-6s I used to run in multiple on my Freightliner. First up is 86224 Caledonian, new to the WOT fleet this month. This is another Doncaster AL6, built in November 1965 and entering traffic the following month as E3134. In February 72, it was one of a number of 86s fitted with GE cross-arm pantographs, retaining it for around 12 years. It received its suspension and bogie mods early and became 86224 in November 1973 under tops. Named Caledonian without ceremony at Willesden MPD in July 79, it received a non-standard version of INTERCITY exec in 1987, with red buffer beams and a black headcode panel at the pantograph end. Multiple working equipment was fitted at the same time. The black headcode panel had gone yellow a year later, but it retained its red buffer beams until 1992, when it entered Glasgow's Springburn Works for overhaul, emerging in swallow livery with black nameplates in June of that year, and that's how it runs here at Walton. Despite operating for Virgin Trains in its final years, it never wore their livery, and after withdrawal in July 2002, it was cut up at Rotherham in 2006. 224 seemed to spend most of its time on trains out of Euston, so I assume it was part of Willesden's West Coast pool, and that's how it runs for me too, with a driver and second man heading down expresses off the Trent Valley line. It will do regular turns on the mid-morning Glasgow motor rail with a Mark IIF rake and trailing GUVs. 255 Penrith Beacon was my first 86-2 and featured in a couple of videos last year when I showed you how I repainted it and prepped it for service. Built by English Electric, E3154 hit the tracks in June 1966. It became 86042 under tops, but 86255 when it was fitted with bogie mods in 1975. It was named Penrith Beacon in 1980 after the ancient monument which sits above the Cumbrian town. In 1986 it was repainted into INTERCITY livery and started doing occasional turns on the Great Eastern Line out of Liverpool Street. Multi-working equipment was fitted in 1987, and then in 1988 it became one of the first 86 repaints into mainline, together with short-lived black headcode panels. That livery didn't last long either, and it gained its final livery, Swallow, in early 1990. Excursions to the eastern region seemed to end around this time, and evidence suggests 255 was allocated to the cross-country pool for the rest of its working life. It was withdrawn from Longsight in August 98 and cut up at Immingham 4 years later. Running alongside it on cross-countries is another Longsight resident, 86260 driver Wallis Oakes GC. Another English Electric E3144 rolled out of Vulcan Foundry in March 1966, becoming 86048 under tops. It was another early adopter of the bogie modifications, receiving the full upgrade in 1975 when it was renumbered to 86260. In February 1981 it was named driver Wallis Oakes GC, and we'll come back to him in a moment. It received the standard exec livery in 1986, multi-working equipment in 87, and then a strange hybrid of all three INTERCITY liveries in 1989 when it could also be seen in the eastern region. By 1990 it was in full Swallow colours with red plates and settled into cross-country diagrams on the upper West Coast mainline. During refurb in 1996 it got new black plates and went on to gain full Virgin Trains colours in 2001. 3 years later it was back in the eastern region, now nameless in the Anglia colours, but was in storage by 2005. Moved around from Crown Point to Immingham to Long Marston, it was taken on as a spot hire loco in 2009 and renumbered to 86702 with the name Cassiopeia. It managed almost another decade like this, racking up a full 50 years of service before being exported to Bulgaria in 2016. Now carrying the number 85002, it still appears to be operating there today into its 7th decade of service.
Venus must have heard my plea. She has sent someone along for me.
It was Saturday the 5th of June 1965. Walton on Trent, brand new station, had just been officially opened by the Queen, and the first of the brand new AL6 electric locomotives were making their debut on the West Coast mainline. The modernisation plan was delivering tangible benefits. In Wheelock Heath, Cheshire, engine driver Wally Oakes closed his front gate behind him and set off on his bike through the lanes to Sandbach Station, a couple of miles away. From there, it was one stop back down the line to Crewe, where he would meet up with his fireman, Gwilym Roberts. Together, they approached their engine, 70051 Firth of Forth, 94 tons of Britannia-class steam locomotive. Waiting for them at the platform were the maroon coaches of their train, the 2:05 p.m. Relief Express to Carlisle. Deep inside the 11-year-old engine, a device known as a petticoat, designed to assist the draw of the exhaust out of the chimney, was on its last legs. Barely minutes into the journey, as the train entered Winsford Station at around 55 mph with its firebox wide open, the petticoat collapsed, blocking Firth of Forth's chimney. With no other means of escape for the exhaust, a massive blowback of flames and smoke burst out of the firebox onto the footplate, engulfing both driver Oakes and fireman Roberts. Roberts was leaning out of the cab at the time, and although he suffered severe burns to his legs, he managed to escape the cab and extinguish his burning clothes against the engine's metalwork. He could feel that the brakes had been applied and hung on for dear life until the train came to a halt. The flames extinguished, he clambered back through the empty cab and found Oakes lying on the embankment, badly burned, dazed, but still alive. Oakes had stayed at the footplate in the inferno, closing the regulator, opening the blower and applying the brake. Only when his train was safely stopped did he drop from the cab. He'd saved his train and all of his passengers from catastrophe. Roberts managed to reach a phone and contact the signalman, who flagged the next southbound train to stop and get the Firth of Forth crew to hospital. Rescue came from a Glasgow Euston Express, and driver Wallace Oakes, a railwayman with the LMS from the age of 15, made his final rail journey behind the headboard of the Royal Scot. In hospital, the pain was such that he had to be suspended above his bed and heavily dosed with morphine. Suffering 80% burns, he died from his injuries a week later, on 12th of June 1965, aged 33. He was buried in an unmarked grave at St Matthew's Church, Haslington, Cheshire, but on 19th of October 1965, he was posthumously awarded the George Cross for bravery. It was purchased by the National Railway Museum in 2017 for £60,000 and is now on display at York. Why not look out for it the next time you're there? In 2018, he finally received a dedicated headstone after an appeal by Heritage Railway magazine, and after revisiting this story, I felt compelled to come down to Haslington to see it, and I brought 86260 with me. So that's my 86-2 fleet. The bodies are a tight fit onto the new chassis, but they are compatible. The original model is of 86-214 sans pare in late 90s trim, so with the newer overhead warning flashes and the fire extinguisher flasks on the roof. The warning flashes can be removed in the usual way, but do be careful on the yellow cab fronts. Proceed with caution. The extinguisher bottles can be removed, but it's pot luck how well glued on they are, and I've made some admittedly quite rough repairs where I've had to lever them off quite firmly. As is often the case, weathering can cover up many crimes, and mine have all had my standard AC roof treatment with weathering powder into the crevices, followed by a spray of roof dirt. I've replaced the pantographs as the original ones were quite chunky. They're still from Helgen, and you should be able to find these quite easily online. 255 and 260 run with stone Faveleys, and 224 on a Brecknell Willis. The lower body sides have all been repainted into the correct silver white, available from Rainbow Railways. Names and numbers come from Railtech, and I favour the 3D waterslide nameplates over etched wherever possible. That's what I've got here. All three match their prototypes for livery layout. 86s are a bit of a minefield for subtle variances in the Swallow livery, particularly regarding the location of the Swallow itself. They're not always at the same ends. All three are sound fitted, running on Locksound 5 chips, 255 and 260 on Legoman Biffo sound, but the latest one, 224, runs on Howes. If you follow any of my posts on Facebook, you may be aware that nearly all of my AC fleet, 86s, 87s and 90s frequently display a bizarre running characteristic. They never used to, it's only been happening within the past 6 to 9 months I would say, and it appears to be totally random which locos it affects and when, but first appeared on a sound-fitted 8-pin Helgen 86. While running, the lights will suddenly go off, and the sound file runs through a powering down, powering up cycle. On the 90s, the pantographs will drop and then raise. Eventually, the lights will come back on. The locos never stop, but they do decelerate and accelerate. I have absolutely no idea why. I've reset and reloaded the decoders to my ECOS. I've turned power up and down on the ECOS. I've done CV8 resets. I've had replacement chips sent to me. I've tried numerous settings within the chip and within the ECOS. I've obviously cleaned the wheels and tracks. The only factor I can isolate is that it happens on all my Lego Manbiffo AC sound chips. So all of my 87s, all of my 86s except 224, and the only 3 of my 9 Class 90s which run on a Biffo chip. I have 4 90s on Bachmann chips, 1 on House Sound, and 1 on Southwest Digital, which have never shown this behaviour. I've come to refer to it as the virus, and it is doing my bloody head in. There aren't many electric loco sound files out there, but House do them for 86s, 87s and 90s. So, as a trial, I've decided to buy a House chip for 86224 and put it on a long-term test. The Lego Manbiffo connection may well be a red herring. This isn't a complaint, I want to make that quite clear. There's every chance I've got some kind of function setting somewhere which is causing this behaviour. If you've ever encountered this issue and, more importantly, solved it, please let me know in the comments below. If the House chip proves successful, I may well have to go through an expensive reblow project across over a dozen other locos. Great. Talking of expensive projects, back in the autumn, I started a long overdue project to improve my Oxford Rail Mark 3A coach rakes. While I was pleased with the interior work and exterior colours, I'm just not skilled enough to apply the fine silver edge to the windows with the necessary level of finesse. I lost the motivation to continue with the 6 TSO coaches of Rake 1 and decided I would replace the lot with Hornby Mark 3s, expecting swallow liveried versions to be announced in January. Well, they weren't, but instead I did find a sizable stock of the exec liveried coaches at clearance prices at Kerno. I've never been a patient man, so I decided that these coaches were something I could work with, and I hoovered up the lot pretty much, and a very large box of over 30 coaches duly arrived, enough for my 2 West Coast mainline sets and the 2 HSTs, although catering vehicles are still a bit of an issue. Putting the HSTs to one side for now, my priority was to get the West Coast mainline sets into service, especially as I'd effectively written off one of my Oxford sets. The standard rake was always 5 TSOs, an RFM and 2 FOs, so I have enough here to run 2 such sets at the same time, north and south. I've got 3 additional coaches here, an extra TSO for sets with 6 TSOs in them, an extra FO for sets with 3 FOs in them, and a TSO for the rear of a southbound train where the loco is leading from the front with a failed DVT immediately behind it. This coach will have a tail light fitted. First off, these are really nice coaches, very smooth and free running and well thought out in terms of couplings and lighting provision. But the coach ends are far less detailed than the Oxfords, being all moulded detail rather than separately fitted parts. For me, I'm prepared to sacrifice that for the correct shades of paint on the body sides and the fine silver window frames which Hornby have achieved. They're incredibly easy to get into and have quite an unusual seat moulding, far more skeletal than we've been used to. However, this really aids and even encourages customisation. It does puzzle me why manufacturers have been so slow to cotton on to correctly coloured coach interiors, and Hornby persist in giving us solid blue for TSO and solid orange for the firsts, both of which are completely wrong. Oxford did at least try, although, as I say, a miss is as good as a mile. Regardless, Hornby's new seat mouldings do at least provide clean, distinct and accessible surfaces for painting. Like my Oxford project, I started off by blasting all the TSOs with this spray can. The colour is called Vanilla, which gives the base colour of most of the coach interior. The seats were all done with the same red paint pen as before, but the moulding really helped me get a near perfect A shape of the red seat back-to-backs set against the cream seat frames. This is such an important visual for an Intercity TSO and looks really good from the platform. The seat armrests are also very clearly moulded, and I went over those with a black pen before airbrushing the tables with an off-white. The interior of the coach shells were done with a cream pen, although I did have to go over them maybe 5 or 6 times to build up a good coverage. The tint of the glazing inserts will change the appearance here, but it's better than a black or dark grey unpainted wall. The glazing itself was split in 2 on each side, and then each half swapped over. Hornby massively over-provide for smokers, insisting that each coach was half smoking and half non-smoking. My recollection as a chain-smoking student on these trains was that there was always one designated smoking coach and everything else was fully non-smoking. I went down the route of adding no smoking labels to the Oxford windows, and it nearly drove me insane. They're also overscale, I think. So here I've done one side of windows fully no smoking and put the unlabelled windows on the other side. My thinking being that if I put all my coaches the same way round and film them from one side, I create the impression that these are correctly signed no smoking coaches. The TSO furthest from the stops at Euston, so next to the loco in a standard configuration, was the smoker, and that's got plain unlabelled windows on both sides. The trailing TSO with the flashing tail light will also be the smoker. I made a few changes to the small windows at the ends where either the toilets or big luggage racks are too. Based on pictures of prototypes, I think I've got this right. There's a little bit more to do on the inside, passengers and lights obviously, and I'd also like to do luggage racks above the seats and paint the vestibules yellow, which I think will be visible when lit. Similar approach with the firsts, except I've used this kind of dusky grey pink quite liberally, as this was very much the dominant colour in a first class coach. The exteriors have been rebranded and renumbered. First off, I've removed the Intercity 125 legends. These came off incredibly easily with just a light dab of white spirit and a cotton bud, same with the coach numbers. Don't forget these are Mark III HST set coaches, not 3As, so I have renumbered them properly. I also removed the coach letters and printing by the doors, which Swallow Mark 3As didn't have. Note that these coaches don't have central door locking lights, which is fine by me, as they were only being rolled out during my modelling era, and you were as likely to travel on a set with them as you were without, certainly during 1993, and to a lesser extent into 94-95. Silver printing always seems harder to remove, and I used IPA here. The first class coaches also had the wands removed from the doors, which again came off very easily. Replacement legends and numbers are from Railtech, secured with satin varnish, which also dealt with the aftermath of my cotton bud work. Just a quick word of warning, the grab handles on the roof here can drop out, so just keep an eye on them when you're handling or masking these coaches, and be prepared to retrieve them from your local carpet monster. Hornby supply 3 types of coupler with these coaches: standard tension locks, magnetic, and fixed rake close couplings. I don't use tension locks on anything here at Walton, least of all on push-pull trains where they are liable to snag in push formation. I favour magnetics and use hunt sets almost everywhere. They are brittle and prone to snapping while fitting or removing them, but the magnets are strong and rarely separate themselves. The Hornbys are injection moulded and definitely of high quality and more pleasing appearance, but I'm finding the magnets to be weak and have had a couple of breakups when running at speed in pull formations. The fixed couplings overcome that problem, but then in push formation, the compression of the train forces the coaches a bit too close together, and I've had a couple of derailments on bends. I've only customised one rake so far, but when the other one is finished, I think I'll have to run the northbound pull set on the fixed couplers and the southbound push set on the magnetics. Different problems need different solutions. The 2 most visible differences between a 3 and a 3A are the roof vents and buffers. The roof vents over the vestibules here can be pushed out from underneath, which will go a long way to making these look more 3A-ish, and I bought several bags of spare buffers to fit too. They're still a compromise, unfortunately. Hornby have a good tooling here and must surely have acquired Oxford's 3A tooling when Hornby brought them out several years ago. I do think it's a strange business decision to keep wasting time and effort on the Beatles and Coca-Cola crap when we still have yawning gaps in the core modern era coach range. 3s and 3As are not the same. We know it and Hornby know it. Nor are all catering vehicles the same. Loco-hauled RFMs are different to HST restaurant cars, and there was a further difference in HST catering cars between the 7-car cross-country sets and the 8-car Western region sets used on the Euston Holyheads. The Mark III family is 50 years old now. Why does it have to be this difficult? I'm still running my modified Oxford RFMs, although they blend fairly well into the rest of the rake. I know I'm going to come back to these at some point and try to do better, but not just yet. I'm halfway to having 2 correctly liveried sets running in and out of Euston at long last. My Oxfords served me well and they helped me design and build this layout, but there was a limit to how far I could improve them. I'll enjoy customising the Hornby sets now, knowing that they will still look factory finished at the end of my efforts. It was a massive financial outlay, but worth it for the extra time it buys me to work on the layout build. That's all for this month. We've only got 2 more episodes left of this series before my summer break, and my focus now is entirely on the hotel construction. If I can crack the lower levels, I think the bedroom block above will be fairly straightforward, and we'll pick up again here next month. I'll have another freight prototype film to share with you as we take a look at the RMC aggregates workings from Peak Forest to Bletchley, one of my longest and definitely brightest trains. And I take another big step towards bankruptcy as 6 brand new locos join the fleet in one go, more than doubling my Type 5 fleet. Assuming I can pay my next broadband bill, I'll see you on the last Sunday in April. Until then, thanks so much for watching, liking and subscribing, and I look forward to your comments below. See you soon. Bye bye.